Savvy Business Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with our host, Christina Nitchman.
Our guest today is Katie Rasoul, author of Hidden Brilliance. Hidden Brilliance is part her personal experience and part lessons of how to improve the way we live and work. Her book provides a blueprint for high achievers to approach fear in a way that is meaningful and helpful, and she shares some of those tips with our audience today. Find out more and get a copy today of Hidden Brilliance at teamawesomecoaching.com. Hi, Katie. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you this afternoon?
I'm great, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you betcha. I'm really, really grateful to have you share today your brilliance. You've written a wonderful new book called Hidden Brilliance that doesn't just touch on the point of dealing with and being an introvert and entrepreneur, but also sometimes just being an overachiever, which often we talked about before the interview. Many business owners are spinning their wheels. They overachieve, but they're not getting the results they want. And you're going to share some of your brilliance and wisdom in that area and how we might better work more effectively as entrepreneurs and bring out our total absolute brilliance, as your book points out. But before we go to share all those wonderful tips, share with our audience a little bit about your backstory and what even brought you to the world of entrepreneurship.
Sure. So I started my business about 2 years ago. So I'm the Chief Awesome Officer for Team Awesome is the name of my company. And I figure when you start your own business, you can call yourself whatever you want. And so that felt more fitting than anything else. And I do leadership coaching and leadership development programs within organizations and strategic advisory work on team culture. And so my background really has been in leadership and HR leadership best practices for over a decade. And so organizational development, talent development, those have always been sort of my jam. And then in really pivoting to my own business and leaving a corporate role, really wanted to bring professional coaching to the mix because I have found that to be so powerful as a way for people to learn and develop about themselves. It certainly was for me. And so now that's how I spend my time is I split across those different functions and work with individuals and with corporations still.
We're back in corporate. Were you more of an HR gal? Was that your niche back in corporate or?
Yeah, before starting my business, I was the vice president of HR for a publicly traded company locally that was about $4 billion in revenue. And so it was a big role. It did some corporate communication, did internal communication, training and development, some of those roles, but also ran multi-unit retail as part of that. So had a foot in operations as well as some of the office functions or the corporate functions. And my favorite has always been in really looking at culture and the experience that we're bringing to the people that work for us. And a big part of that is leaders along the way. And so both the individuals and then what are we doing as an organization to create belonging, to create a place that people really want to be at. At work. Yeah,
you brought up some really good points that I'd like us to touch on. And the one thing I hear from entrepreneurs that have come either before the show or, as guests, tell me one of the biggest things they struggle with is to get really good talent and help. And I think there's a lot of issues in that. For one, entrepreneurs say they have this really hard part of letting go and trusting that they can hire someone and trust that the work will get done right, because they kind of feel like, this is my baby, no one can do it like I can. And of course you have to let go or you're not going to grow. Oh my gosh, that rhymes. But then you talk about culture, and I worked with as an employee and as a consultant with companies that start with a certain culture and then start to change. So let's start first with the hiring good talent. How do entrepreneurs begin to, for one, trust, number two, find the best talent for their company?
Yeah, well, I think that we are in a perfect moment for this as entrepreneurs because we are really getting in the thick of, quote unquote, the gig economy. And so for the first time, we have more options than ever of who we hire. Do we hire someone on a project or contract versus hiring someone as an actual employee, which can be really tricky for entrepreneurs. And so that's what's beautiful now is that it feels like the marketplace has opened up a little bit because there are a lot of talented people now doing freelance work. which wasn't always the case before. And so, it's always hard to find great people, especially in an economy when the unemployment is so low and people are well employed, but more and more people are just wanting to be on their own. And so I have found that in my business, I have made work arrangements in contract work, in partnerships with other coaches or other facilitators that are on their own, that we work on specific projects. And it just makes it so much more fun because you can really hire the people to be experts at what they do rather than try and fill the rest of their job with things that they're not as good at. So I hire marketing experts for marketing, and I hire facilitators for facilitating. And so, that's what I would look at is say, like, what are the possibilities to find great people out there? And then use a good system to make sure that you're selecting quality talent. I've been in HR. That's something that comes second nature to me at this point in my career. But if that's not second nature to you, then, helping find someone that can teach you how to just be a little bit dangerous from an interviewing and talent selection standpoint.
Ooh, I like that. Actually, I saw the most interesting interview process on YouTube, and it was interviewing for a teacher to teach kids in a pool. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And they actually did it not the normal sit down, just sit across from each other and chat. That was a very small part of the interview. But they actually at one point said, okay, I'm going to sit on the floor like I'm 5, and I want you to teach me how to tie my shoe. And some of the applicants were like, okay. Because the whole point is, you got to come at this. These are going to be 2, 3, 5, 6-year-olds, and you got to teach them how to do the simplest of things and break it down in blocks in the pool, and come at it from their level. And so they wanted you to show them that you could do that. And so it was a very interesting interview. And so when you say get risky or get out there a little bit, is that what you're talking about? Have you kind of done experiential type things in interview processes?
Yeah, certainly I've looked for not just the interview, but all evidence. There's so much more evidence out there about people's work and portfolios or whatever, and getting into that. I think that whatever you're going to need that person to do, how do you make sure, like the swimming instructor example, that it's what you expect out of them. And so that way it's not a surprise to them either of what the work will be and what that will look like. But an example, I was looking at someone to help me with marketing. And one of the questions I asked were I don't see a lot of marketing for your firm. Ooh. Tell me about that. And so digging into if you never want to go and get your hair styled by someone with a bad haircut, right?
Yeah.
You got to check out their work. And so there's more opportunity than ever just to gather bits of evidence on LinkedIn, on people's portfolios, on their websites, on videos to understand what their work might look like. And any other freelancers or entrepreneurs that are doing business in their own right will hopefully have some really great examples of their work easily accessible.
Oh, I like that you mentioned this is good not only for the business owner looking for talent, but also for the business owner to recall and remember when they're posting and putting their stuff online. One gal came to me and she had a very kind of messy divorce, and she came on my show when it had just become live practically 6 years ago, and we did a phenomenal interview. She paid me for promotional interview to get her word out on her business. And now she's like, I changed my name. I don't want anything tied to my own name. Please take everything down you did of our interview. And I am such a kick butt PR marketing person that I had her everywhere. She was on every browser of our interview. And I kind of told her that I can take down the interview in all the places I put it up. But the internet's an interesting thing. Once you post things, they don't really disappear off of all the browsers. There's they're hiding in places. So I got rid of all of our interview on all the different platforms I put it on, but it wasn't gone off the internet and the browsers. And so I think if you are, a person who's putting your talent out there, you're a freelancer or even a business owner, to remember that if you post something, it's going to be a reflection of yourself or your business. And you might not be able to get rid of it easily.
Absolutely. And this wasn't a problem for us 20 years ago, but now, especially as we have the younger generation coming up, I mean, that's been their entire understanding of how things work on the interwebs. And so it's a great opportunity for us to share what we know and share what we can do. And if we pivot at some point with a name change or otherwise, then we just have to know that that's there as well.
Yeah, and be okay with it. I mean, I think for her, it was like, I just don't want any part of that. But see, that's the thing about the internet. It's the blessing and the curse of it is that things don't just disappear on it. So if you are a business trying to build a brand, or even if you're a freelancer trying to build your brand as a person, to recall that anything you put up can be a reflection of your future work, and it can affect you getting work with employees or vice versa. People even coming to you with talent because they'll be like, I don't want to work for that company.
Yeah, exactly. A self Google every once in a while is a good free litmus test of what your brand is out there.
You mentioned something very interesting as well, Katie, that a lot of people are choosing freelance, and that's what's really cool. And I think the new workforce, the millennials entering, are kind of like, I want something that's deeper. I don't want to just be tied to my chair 9-12 hours a day. I want something that I'm in this, but it means something to me. And I find a lot of that workforce is choosing to do more and more freelance or gigs on the side hustles, as they call it, to build a more productive and better life, because now you're not just like stuck to one employee.
Yeah. And I love that people are starting to do this on the side. I think that's, so difficult in its own right, because you have a full-time job, you have other priorities in your life, and then you're adding this side business on as well. Can be really challenging. And so I commend those who are doing that. And there's a whole other flip of the coin of people who leave their roles and do it full time, even though maybe they don't have secure business, right, in that first year or the first couple of years. And so there's so much opportunity. And it can be scary. There's certainly some risk involved. But I have found, and a big part of this is what I write about in my book, because it was sort of a turning point for me, was that once I was on my own, after a number of months, I really had kind of this existential crisis, because I was always someone who had really high expectations for myself. And I didn't realize it at the time, but now being on my own, I no longer had a company or a boss who was sort of guiding expectations for me. And so I just let them fly through the roof. As an entrepreneur, I should be doing this. I'm not doing enough work, and all these things that would come up. And it became really clear to me, at least in my case, that it wasn't not knowing enough about QuickBooks or not having an idea of how to sell or marketing that was going to cause me to fail. It was me. Yeah. And my own mindset, it really was. And so I thought, I'm set up for success. I have an MBA. I was a finance major. I can run a business, and I can, except where the turning point was and the sticking point in my business being successful or not was me being able to change my mindset in a way that I could manage my expectations now as my own boss instead of being part of a company.
Well, I love that we're bringing this up, because I had the same issue. I think you don't realize until you leave the job situation or a corporation that you've been tied to, that now it all rests on you. You don't need the boss saying, okay, this report is due by 5. It's like, no, now you decide what's due by 5 or whatever. And I, for myself, were finding that I was, I had to learn how to do a perfect website, and I had to do perfect marketing. And I'm like, these are not my expertise. Like you were mentioning your niches, maybe finding talent. Those are your gifts. Where are my gifts? Where are not my gifts? And I'm spending time all day on it. I'm just, as we were saying earlier, I'm spinning my wheels like a hamster on a wheel. I'm not getting anywhere. What's your advice for people who are starting and feeling overwhelmed, but they don't know how to manage their expectations? Where do they begin?
I think the biggest thing for me has been really being able to be still and know kind of intuitively using my gut of like, what is the right thing? Because what I do know about being an entrepreneur is I have never received so much advice in my whole life, conflicting advice at that, outside of being a parent. So, everyone has say, do this, sell like this, market this way. And those are often coming from people who are not my industry. They're not my type of business or not my type of personality. I'm an introvert and I'm very, very tied to authenticity. That's a really strong value for me. So a lot of marketing or sales techniques do not feel right for my business. And so being able to understand what my highest and best use is, do that well, and then find experts who can do some of the other pieces. And so anytime that I am like, I don't really know how to do this, because as entrepreneurs, we wear all those hats. You got to find the balance between, yes, I can, or I choose to do this, or I'm going to choose to give this to someone else. There's things that come up all the time. I'm like, well, I could probably learn how to do that. And then I'm like, no, Katie, no, it is not your highest and best use to learn how to use InDesign or to pick up a photography class, because that would be helpful for my Instagram account or something. No, like leave that to people who do those things well. And I need to focus on helping people build their culture, helping people build their leadership style. And so it's a constant reminder and retooling and revisiting that to make sure that I'm staying aligned with what's most important.
Yes. And you mentioned something before, which I think is key, and that's mindset. One of the biggest saboteurs, I think, for myself included, is ourselves. And we set up like, oh, I'm not doing this perfect enough, or we beat ourselves up. We're our worst enemy. And you had mentioned something also, like you'd hear marketing tips or sales tips that just don't feel authentic to you, but well, it's working for them. And that was one of my key things I did. I was copying other people in a number of different areas, from marketing to sales to whatever. And it worked for them, but hey, I'm forgetting they're a $25 million company. And I'm like, what? $1,000 a month. Yeah, it's a little bit different how, they're doing things to how I should be doing things. And hey, I'm a different person too. I'm a different industry. So those are all key points to think about, that we're not the same. Now talk a little bit about mindset. How did you get your shift around mindset to where you're being more productive in your business?
I think about like, what are the things that are top priority for me? I stay really focused on either my top goals or like my big audacious goals that feel really exciting, or things that are really important to support those. And sometimes it can be very overwhelming. And one of the things that I do to stay really focused and stay in the right mindset is and when I see things, or I start to feel in my body that I'm getting overwhelmed and there's too many balls in the air, I do what I call the slash and burn. And that is, I look at my calendar, I look at my to-do list, and I just start crossing stuff off. So like this, I don't need to do this. I can delegate that. This, no one needs to do this. It's gone. Or I don't need to go to that event. I don't need to do this. I can't do two things at once. So one of these goes, and I just slash and burn on everything that I feel is weighing on me. And I instantly feel better. And I do that with the thought in mind of what is most important. What are my goals? What are my priorities? And anything that doesn't fit that doesn't get to play along anymore. And so that's been super valuable. I probably end up doing that naturally, maybe once a quarter. Things creep back in somehow, and I start to feel overwhelmed. Like I can actually feel my shoulders are tighter and more stressed out, and I can feel like I'm not as present in my day-to-day life. And so those are really good indicators for me that something needs to change to get back to center.
Wow. I like that you mentioned that. For me, I think one of the things I had a problem with was saying no to people or guests or topics that were not a good fit for the rest of our audience. And I remember my husband was like, listen, you have to get focused and not feel bad, because you're in business and you can't help people unless you're focused on bringing your audience what they most need. And so, but I was like, and so I finally followed his advice after 2 years of him, I was like, stop saying yes to everything. And I started to say no, but very nice and offering like, okay, this isn't the best fit. Try my friend over here who also has a show. But the minute I finally let go of that, and that was a mindset thing for me, oh my gosh, all these awesome people like you and all these other wonderful guests start pouring in that were offering so much value to our audience, and our audience responded, and we're growing even more as our audience, and I'm getting more feedback that people are even happier with the content they're getting. So I mean, sometimes me not wanting to say no is more about me than them. You don't want to hurt people's feelings, and we come up with our own ideas of what's nice or not nice and hurt ourselves. And it's all in between our 2 years here that we make up this stuff in our head that sometimes makes our business a little challenging.
Oh gosh, absolutely. And it is so fascinating to watch it happen as an entrepreneur. I've taken on some clients that I should not have. They were not the right fit. And those were great lessons to learn, but it is hard, especially when you're starting out, right? It's hard if you don't know where all of your revenue might be coming from. So it's hard to say no to that contract. Yeah. And you're right. Once you start doing that, then the closer you are to center, the right people start coming, and requires a bit of trust in the universe, but it continues to prove itself true over and over for me. And that is just fascinating.
Yeah. And it's funny, Katie, because there is such an extraordinarily amount of amazing business owners, people out there doing amazing work, that I don't have to worry about saying no to a couple people, because there's millions of people that have a wonderful message that fits our audience, that will help them and help the person coming on, that we're never going to run out. It's not like there's, oh my gosh, we might go on empty. No. And that's the same thing I think entrepreneurs feel with not taking that contract. I might get a zero balance in my bank account. And that's not going to happen if you trust and let go. And by let go, meaning don't not do anything, because sometimes I mean, people think, oh, sit back and do anything. Woo. No, you got to do the work. But I mean, sit back and not fret that you're going to be on empty.
Totally. It's pretty interesting to watch and to experience that when it is about you and your mindset. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing that affects us, I feel, as entrepreneurs.
Now, let's talk about culture, Katie. We mentioned early on that you really help businesses with, building their culture. Now, I've witnessed something very interesting for businesses that I've come on board and they've had a certain culture. And over time, as we're working together and they're growing, the culture starts to shift, and sometimes not in a really good way. How do businesses keep a hold of their culture, build it in a way that everyone can't wait to come in and be jazzed about work? How do they build that type of culture in place?
Yeah, I think that is something that companies experience a lot. What worked for 10 people in a small company doesn't even work at 25, or the same for 100 people. And certainly, big corporations, that's a whole different ballgame. And I think that at every level, the strategy needs to be a little bit different and tweaked to really the living, breathing culture of the organization. But one of the things that I see as the biggest lever is the leaders. And so as you get bigger, if it's not just an owner and founder anymore, and there's other people in leadership roles, we tend to promote people or bring people in because of their technical expertise in the subject matter. And then we underestimate how important they are as leaders of humans to the culture and what that means for the rest of the business. And so as much as people can invest and make sure that every single leader in the organization is creating a wonderful culture that is aligned with what your intention is, that's the key, because you can't do it all. You can't be everything to everybody, but you have people who are, responsible for 5 direct reports or whatever. So they need to be that person for their 5 people. And so when we have leaders who are undereducated or that are not asked to put people and the relationships and culture in equal or better form than the actual results of the company, that's when we see them suffer. And, it's something that is never really finished. It's never easily measurable in the sense of a balance sheet per se.
Yes.
But you can feel it. And I can walk in an organization and the culture hits you like a cool breeze or like some pretty thick air. And I'm someone who senses that very easily as well. So that's just sort of a superpower strength of mine. But
I love that.
It's something, there's something there, and it's undeniable. And if we create a bunch of leaders and all of the leaders who are paddling in the same direction when it comes to culture, it makes a huge difference.
I like that you say paddling in the same direction. And I've gotten that same feeling. I've gone to places and you feel like each of the employees has this invisible chain attached to the desk. It's not, you don't see it, but it's like it's there, but it's not. And I'm like, oh gosh, this place. Oof. But you make a good point there, because what I've noticed in some of the businesses I've been with over years, and they have me come in from time to time, is that they'll be good at, sometimes I'll have leaders that rock it at like 20 people, but as they grow to 100 or 200, those same leaders are not growing to the same extent. Because like you said, you can't do the same things you did at 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, 100. It changes. And I think some of the harder part for some of those leaders is that, okay, you are awesome. You're still awesome. But what you did at 10 people are not going to work now at 100. You have to shift. And I think that's hard for some people if you've done things for a long time a certain way to shift and make that shift. And then some of them are just like, I'm not shifting. This is perfect. It's worked in the past. It's just staying this way. And then the hard part is trying to tell management or, upper leaders that, it might be time to ask them to leave and look for other leaders. And then that's a really hard talk.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard. We're the same person. And so when a company grows and we don't want to evolve how we lead or how we structure leadership within the organization, that can be really challenging. But it can be the single most important thing, I believe, that you do to make your business successful. And it requires trust. It requires having the right people to be able to trust and let go, and then actually letting go. And it doesn't mean that you don't touch it or you're not as involved in those things at all, but your level of involvement needs to go up. So I tell people all the time, when they go in leadership roles, they used to maybe do a task. And now as a leader, they are still responsible for that task. They shouldn't be doing it anymore, but maybe they spend that same hour teaching, training, leading, quality checking, whatever, but not doing it. So they've spent time and are responsible for the same things, but are now at a leadership level of involvement instead of a doing level of involvement.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard if you're a type of person that likes to get your hands dirty and you're like, but I don't like this part. I like to do the doing part. Well, then maybe for that person, another position, another place where they get to do more doing stuff is where they best need to be. Because I've met people like my mom. She's a real get down and dirty and do type thing. She wants to get their hands dirty. And then as she got raised up, and now she died 2 years ago now, but when she was in her job, she loved the getting her hands dirty, and they kept giving her manager positions. And she's like, I don't want to manage. I don't want to lead. I want to do. And so I think that's another problem that businesses make is let's just keep promoting you. You're doing a good job. And, and we have to reward you by giving you another promotion. I'm like, no, because if they're not fit for that role, you're not really doing the business a favor or the employee.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. Well, this has been so fascinating, but I don't want people to leave without finding out how they can find out more about you and Hidden Brilliance and get a copy.
Absolutely. So you can find me on all sorts of social media. I'm pretty easy to find either as Katie Rasoul or Team Awesome Coaching. And teamawesomecoaching.com is my website, is a great place to go. But Hidden Brilliance, it's Hidden Brilliance, a high achieving introvert's guide to self-discovery, leadership, and playing big. And it's available on Amazon, and it's certainly going to resonate for high achieving introverts, but high achievers, introverts, extroverts, entrepreneurs. There's so much in there. I think that is meaningful across all of those different facets.
Yes. That
hopefully people can find it. It's part the story. So it really talks about some of my journey, and particularly this kind of existential crisis I had now as an entrepreneur, and that turning point. And then the second half of the book is really about doing the work. So different activities that I personally did to get from point A to point B and really adjust my mindset and be able to be successful in my business. I was on a path to fail and was able to use those activities to be in a better place. So I wanted to share those with everyone through my book.
Awesome. Well, I know it'll help many out there who pick it up and read it. Go get a copy of Hidden Brilliance, everyone. Go to teamawesomecoaching.com and find out more about Katie. And Katie, thank you so much for coming to share your brilliance and wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
Thanks so much.
Savvy Business Radio broadcasts worldwide via a large podcast network, celebrating business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful individuals. Find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest. Call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.